I want to share with you something that happened in my community that I have never forgotten. A man came to see me, a good Muslim, a faithful man who prayed 5 times a day, who gave his zakat, who had worked hard for 30 years building a modest but meaningful amount of wealth. He had a business, he had a home, he had savings. He had 4 children who loved him. And he came to me because he had just received a diagnosis that frightened him. And for the first time in his adult life, he was sitting with the reality that his time on this earth was finite. He sat across from me and he said, "Imam, I have not written my wasiyah. I have been meaning to for years. I always said I would do it later." He said the word later the way people say it when they realize that later has run out. He was 61 years old. In the years that followed, I watched that delayed decision cost his family a significant portion of what he had spent a lifetime building, not because the man was dishonest or careless, because the legal and practical machinery that activates when a person dies without clear documented instructions for their wealth is indifferent to the goodness of the person who owned that wealth. It does not care how hard you worked. It does not ask about your intentions. It simply distributes what it finds according to whatever default rules govern the jurisdiction in which you lived. Rules that were written by lawmakers who knew nothing about your family, your values, your faith, or the specific responsibilities Allah placed in your hands during your lifetime. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said something in a hadith that I believe is the single most urgent financial instruction in the entire Sunnah for a Muslim living in the modern world. He said, and this is narrated in both Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih Muslim, which makes it among the most firmly established hadith in existence. It is not permissible for any Muslim who has something to bequeath to pass even 2 nights without having his wasiyah, his last will and testament, written and kept ready with him. 2 nights, not 2 months, not 2 years, 2 nights. And the Prophet himself, peace be upon him, followed this instruction to its fullest conclusion. He never delayed this one thing. Among his final instructions before his passing was a clear accounting of his obligations, his wishes, and the disposition of what he left behind. With this is the Sunnah money habit that builds generational wealth, and 90% of Muslims are not following it. Not because they are bad Muslims, but because nobody taught them that the wasiyah is not merely a spiritual obligation tied to their death. It is one of the most powerful generational wealth instruments in the Islamic tradition. It is the mechanism through which everything a Muslim builds in this life is transmitted, protected, and grown by those who follow. Today, I am going to teach you the complete Islamic framework around the wasiyah, the what, the why, the how, and the 2 divine principles of provision that sit beneath it. These are 2 of the 12 divine laws that I have spent over 4 decades identifying in the Quran and the Sunnah. They govern specifically how wealth transfers between generations and whether that transfer builds something lasting or dissipates in confusion, conflict, and loss. Write in the comments right now, Ya Allah, help me fulfill my obligations to those who come after me. My name is Imam Hassan al-Rashidi. I was born in Amman, Jordan, and came to the United States at 25 years old. I studied Islamic sciences and fiqh at Al-Azhar University in Cairo, the oldest institution of Islamic scholarship in the world, founded over 1,000 years ago. I have served Muslim communities in New York and New Jersey for more than 4 decades, and I have witnessed across hundreds of Muslim families what happens when this particular sunnah is followed and what happens when it is not. The contrast is not subtle. It is the difference between a family that inherits not just money but clarity, direction, and the continued barakah of its patriarch's values, and a family that inherits confusion, conflict, legal costs, and the slow disintegration of wealth that took a lifetime to build. My father, Sheikh Abdullah al-Rashidi, wrote his wasiyah the same year he got married. He updated it every 5 years throughout his life, and he reviewed it every Ramadan as a matter of personal spiritual discipline. He kept it in a sealed envelope that every member of the family knew about, in a location that every member of the family knew. He used to say, "Hassan, the most loving thing a man can do for his family is to take care of them when he is gone, not just financially, legally, practically, clearly, because love without clarity creates chaos, and chaos is what takes the wealth." I want to place this teaching in the world we are living in right now because the numbers are urgent. According to the most current estate planning research published just this year, only 26% of Americans have a will in 2026, down 5 points from last year. 74% of people, including 41% of baby boomers and 45% of Gen Xers, the generations that hold approximately 77% of all private wealth in this country, have no will at all. The world is on the verge of the largest generational wealth transfer in human history, an estimated $124 trillion expected to change hands over the next several decades. And the research is clear. The primary obstacle to that transfer reaching intended beneficiaries is not taxes, not markets, not economic conditions. It is silence. It is the absence of a will. It is the delay of the wasiyah. It is the man or woman who says every year that they will get to it and does not get to it until it is too late. For the Muslim, this failure is not just a financial tragedy. It is a violation of a direct prophetic instruction. And I want to be clear about the weight of that, not to produce guilt, but to produce urgency. Because the Prophet, peace be upon him, did not offer the 2-night instruction casually. He did not say it is recommended or it is nice to have. He said it is not permissible, la yahilu, to have wealth you intend to bequeath and to pass 2 nights without your wasiyah being ready. Well, this is the strength of language the Prophet reserved for things of genuine consequence. And when you understand what the wasiyah actually does, not just spiritually but financially, you will understand why. The first divine principle I want to teach you today, I call the law of the documented trust. In the Islamic system, the responsibility to document your financial intentions is not separate from the responsibility to fulfill them. It is part of them. The Quran says in Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 282, in what is the longest verse in the entire Quran, and the verse that scholars call the verse of documentation. O you who believe, when you contract a debt for a specified term, write it down. Write it down. In the longest verse, Allah revealed, He specifically and at length instructs the believer to document financial arrangements, to write the term, to have witnesses, to record what is owed and what is promised. The scholars of Islamic jurisprudence have consistently noted that this instruction is not limited to commercial debt. It reflects a comprehensive Islamic principle that financial intentions without documentation are incomplete. They exist in the heart, but they do not exist in the world. And the world, after you are gone, operates on what is documented, not on what was intended. The wasiyah is the master document of your financial life. It is the written form of your trusteeship, the record of how you intend to discharge the trust that Allah placed in your hands and return it to the people and causes He has indicated. An Islamic wasiyah is not identical to a secular Western will, though it overlaps with it significantly. The Islamic wasiyah has a specific structure rooted in Quranic law. The first obligation is the discharge of debts. All debts must be paid before any inheritance is distributed, because the Prophet, peace be upon him, said the soul of the believer is held hostage by its debt until it is paid. The second obligation is the fulfillment of any voluntary bequests, limited by the Islamic rule that no more than 1/3 of the estate may be designated through voluntary bequest. The remaining 2/3 is distributed according to the Quranic rules of inheritance, the fara'id, which Allah specified in Surah An-Nisa with extraordinary precision. Now I want to explain why this specific structure, debts first, voluntary bequests second, Quranic inheritance third, is not just a legal formula, but a financial wisdom of the highest order. The reason most generational wealth transfers fail is not taxes, it is family conflict. The research is clear, and I have watched it in real families. When the instructions are unclear or absent, the people left behind disagree, siblings fight, spouses dispute, children compete, courts become involved. Legal fees consume what took decades to build. I have watched Muslim families spend 3 to 5 years in legal disputes over estates that had no wasiyah, burning through the inheritance in the process of trying to claim it. And I have watched Muslim families whose patriarch followed the Prophet's instruction pass through the transition of death with clarity, generosity, and a deepened family bond rather than a fractured one. The difference was not the amount of wealth. The difference was the document. What the law of the documented trust applies at every level of wealth. It does not require a large estate to be urgent. The man with a house, a car, a savings account, and 4 children who has no wasiyah has left behind a financial time bomb. The woman with a small business and 2 children from a first marriage who has no written instructions has created the conditions for a conflict that could define and damage her family's relationship for a generation. The Prophet's instruction was not conditional on wealth, it was conditional on having anything to bequeath. If you have anything, any account, any property, any business interest, any possession of value, the Sunnah says, document your intentions tonight, not next Ramadan, tonight. The second divine principle I want to share today I call the law of the living transmission. And this is where the Islamic approach to generational wealth goes far beyond what any secular financial planner teaches. The wasiyah is the minimum. The Prophet, peace be upon him, did not just instruct his companions to write their final wishes. He modeled throughout his life a practice that the Islamic tradition calls tarbiyah maliyah, financial education and preparation of those who will come after you. He taught his companions about money. He taught his children and their spouses about obligation, about trust, about the spiritual principles that governed the financial decisions he made. He made sure that the people who would inherit from him understood not just what they were receiving, but why, the values, the practices, the relationship with wealth that had produced what he was passing on. Because he understood something that most wealthy people never fully grasp. You cannot build generational wealth by transferring only money. You must also transfer the habits, principles, and understanding that produce and protect wealth over time. This is the law of the living transmission. Generational wealth is not primarily a financial transfer. It is a knowledge transfer that happens to include financial assets. The families that maintain and grow wealth across generations in the Islamic tradition and in the historical record more broadly are families where each generation received not just an inheritance but a financial education, where the children grew up watching their parents make purposeful decisions about money, give zakat with intention, discuss financial obligations openly, and treat wealth as a trust rather than a possession, where the wasiyah was not a surprise document that appeared after a death, but a living conversation that had been happening at the kitchen table for years, where the children knew before they ever needed to know exactly what their parents valued and how they managed what Allah had given them. My father's wasiyah was not the first time I heard about his financial intentions. He talked about it throughout my childhood, not in a morbid way, in the way that a man who understands that he is a trustee naturally speaks about stewardship. He would say, "When I am gone, these are my obligations, and this is how I want them discharged. This is what I want you to do with your portion. This is what I want you to remember about how we lived." He was transmitting through those conversations not just instructions for after his death, but a way of relating to money that shaped how I made financial decisions for the rest of my life. That transmission was worth more than any dollar amount he left behind, because the dollars can be spent. The understanding, the Quranic framework, the prophetic habits, the values around stewardship and obligation and generosity, that is what compounds across generations. The practical application of the law of the living transmission has three dimensions. The first is documentation. Write the wasiyah, keep it current, make sure it reflects your actual intentions and the actual disposition of your actual assets in accordance with Islamic guidance. The second is education. Begin talking to your children and your spouse about money with the same naturalness you bring to any other important topic in family life. Not lecturing, talking, sharing, modeling, letting them see how you make decisions, why you give zakat, how you think about debt, what principles guide your spending. The third is conversation, telling the people in your life what you intend while you are alive to tell them, rather than leaving them to discover it from a document after you are gone. The research I mentioned earlier showed that 42% of heirs expecting an inheritance have never discussed it with the person who will leave it. That silence is not protection. It is a setup for exactly the conflict and loss that the wasiyah is designed to prevent. Let me speak about something that I know many Muslims face, specifically in the Western context. A tension that I have navigated with hundreds of families and that I want to address directly. In the United States, in the United Kingdom, in Canada, and Australia, the legal system governing inheritance does not automatically follow the Quranic rules of fara'id. If you die without documentation, the state will distribute your estate according to its own rules, which may or may not align with what Allah specified in Surah An-Nisa. The only way to ensure that your wealth is distributed according to Islamic principles is to document your intentions in a legally valid form. The wasiyah, prepared with the help of a knowledgeable Islamic estate planning attorney or advisor, can incorporate the Quranic inheritance rules, your voluntary bequests, as your debt discharge instructions, and your wishes for your minor children, all within a document that the legal system of your country will honor. This is not a complex undertaking. It does not require great wealth. It requires the same discipline the Prophet, peace be upon him, applied to it. The discipline of not allowing 2 nights to pass with the matter undone. I have counseled families who spent $3,000 to $5,000 and many months in legal conflict because no document existed. The cost of preparing a wasiyah is a fraction of that. The cost of not preparing one can be the wealth itself. This is what the Prophet knew. This is why his instruction was as firm as it was. I want to connect this to the 12 divine laws of provision that I have been sharing in this series. The laws I have taught up to this point, the law of halal circulation, the law of decreed increase, the habit of the known account, the habit of the earned before the spent, the law of discharged obligation, the law of directed deployment, and the principle of purposeful spending, all of these protect and build wealth within a single lifetime. The law of the documented trust and the law of the living transmission are the laws that carry wealth beyond that lifetime. They are the generational extension of everything else you build. Without them, the wealth a Muslim builds across 40 years of faithful financial practice can dissipate in the first 18 months after their death. With them, it compounds, because not only the assets, but the knowledge and the values that produce them move forward. There are still 4 more laws in the complete system of 12 that I will share in upcoming teachings. Each one adds a dimension to the complete framework, and this is the one that most urgently calls for immediate action, because every other law I have taught you builds wealth that will one day need to be transmitted, and the transmission requires the document. So let me close with a direct instruction, not as a general principle, but as a specific action I am asking you to take. Tonight, or at the very latest this week, begin the process of your wasiyah. If you already have a will, review it. Check that it reflects the current reality of your assets, your family, and your Islamic intentions. If you do not have one, and the majority of you who are watching this do not, begin today. Find an attorney in your area who has experience with Islamic estate planning, or research the Islamic inheritance rules sufficiently to ensure the document you create reflects the fara'id correctly. Tell your spouse and your children where the document will be kept. Have the conversation. Say out loud, while you are alive to say it, what you intend. The Prophet, peace be upon him, said that the Muslim who passes 2 nights without this document is violating a clear instruction. You have heard the instruction now. The obligation has arrived. Do not allow another 2 nights to pass. In my next teaching, I am going to reveal a 9th divine law of provision, one that addresses a specific financial decision that most Muslim households make entirely by instinct, without any awareness that the Quran has explicit guidance on it. And it is the law that governs partnerships and joint financial ventures, what the Quran says about who you should and should not share financial risk with, and why the wrong partnership is one of the fastest ways to lose everything you have built. I have watched this law operate and be violated in more Muslim households than almost any other. Do not miss it. Subscribe to this channel now and turn on notifications so that teaching reaches you when it is released. If this video has created urgency for you today, if you heard the Prophet's 2-night instruction and felt the weight of it, share this with every Muslim in your life who has not yet written their wasiyah. That sharing may be the most valuable financial gift you give them this year. And leave a comment below. Do you have your wasiyah written and current? Just answer yes or no. Your answer might inspire someone else in this community to take action tonight. May Allah give every one of you the clarity, the discipline, and the tawfiq to fulfill the trust He placed in your hands, not just in how you earn and spend and give, but in how you ensure what you leave behind reaches those for whom it was intended in the way He specified with the values He revealed. May He protect your families from the confusion and conflict that come from silence. May He bless what you build with the barakah to outlast you, to grow beyond you, and to carry forward the name of a Muslim who took the trust seriously from beginning to end. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.